Hi, everybody. It looks like I was on mute when I was just talking. So welcome to today's webinar. This is Irina Lewis, and I appreciate you joining our Big Data Maturity Trends today. We're going to jump right in. I've got a host of experts with me today who are going to help share some of the results from the largest Big Data Maturity Survey done and share some of the trends that leaders in the space are talking about and what they're doing to really drive value out of their big data and analytics. We're also going to be speaking with someone from the front lines, and that's Brandon Bunker. He's the Senior Director of Data and Analytics and Artificial Intelligence at Vivint Smart Home. He's going to be joining us in a little bit. But we're going to start out with my Vice President of Product, Josh Clark, who's been in the area of both business intelligence and big data for almost 20 years. The gray on the side of his very suave looking, but that shows his level of experience. We've also got Vijay Raja from Cloudera and Dan Kogan joining us, two of our partners who also have quite a bit of experience in this area. Before we jump in, since we are talking about big data maturity, what I'd like to do is just ask really quickly for us to get a sense of what is going on with the audience. Who is it that have joined us? So I'd like to ask you, where are you in your big data journey? It will be popping up on your BrightTalk screen here, and we encourage those of you who have joined us to go ahead and let us know where you are. Are you just thinking about it? Are you in the process of implementing? Or perhaps you already have it there and you've got a small number of nodes in your Hadoop cluster or your big data cluster, or perhaps a larger number. Depending on where you are, it's a journey. So whether you've been in it for a year or several years, you may be in different places. We've got about 20 more seconds before the poll closes, so we encourage you to join us here. And we're going to be wrapping up here in about 10 minutes. It's looking like we've got a pretty even spread, although a vast majority, about 33% of you look like you have over 100 nodes. And so quite a few who are further on in the journey, but we also have about 25% who are just thinking about it. So it sounds like we've got a pretty decent mix there joining, and I think everyone's going to get a vast amount of value from today's session. So I'm going to let us jump right in and turn things over to Josh Clark to share our Big Data Maturity survey results. Yes. Thank you, Josh.
And thanks, Irina. And good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. What I'm going to walk through now is kind of an overview of the results of our latest Big Data Maturity Survey. This is a survey that we've executed in the past 2 years. It's one of the largest, or we think it's possibly the largest survey of its kind, over 2,500 respondents across 77 countries, 1,400 different companies around the world. And this year's results, at a high level, were pretty excited for us. The first thing we found is almost 95% of our respondents feel like they're either achieving value or are extremely optimistic about achieving value from their big data investment. The other thing that we saw compared to last year is a big jump in terms of customers that are in production, and that's actually kind of consistent with what I see in the survey results here. Around 25% of folks are thinking about it, but the other 75% are deploying or are in production with their big data investment. And then the other thing that we saw is, this is kind of a measure of optimism. Maybe this is similar to consumer optimism and how it impacts the market. But 97% of the folks that we talked to were very excited about doing more with big data over the next 3 months versus doing less. So our experience and what we're seeing is people are achieving value, and if anything, they're planning on investing more in the world of big data. So that was kind of a high-level summary of what we're seeing. Like I said, at least in our view, the responses were extremely promising, and we're really excited to continue to work with customers that are going on that journey. And the journey, as we see it, is really this is, for the folks that are implementing Hadoop or thinking about it or have implemented with 10 or 100 nodes, my guess is that you're somewhere along this journey. And this is, at least in our classification and from what we see in the market, we see kind of three major chunks of driving results with big data and analytics. And the first is, I have a large amount of data. It's expensive to store it in my traditional platforms, and what I want to do is figure out how to kind of more effectively store this data and how to speed up the processing of that data. So traditional ETL offload, for example, falls into this class of operational efficiency. And that's really the first step that we see a lot of our customers taking when it starts with their big data investment. The next step is really moving towards, let's get smarter about how we're optimizing workloads. This might involve moving traditional BI workloads off of a traditional enterprise data warehouse and into a big data cluster, a Hadoop cluster. It might be doing some data science, starting to do machine learning jobs using Spark or some of the other packages that are available on the big data platforms. And then the third chunk is really using your big data investment to drive an information advantage, being very strategic about the investments that you're making and the use cases you're tackling, and giving business users as well as bots and AI bots the ability to drive an information advantage versus competitors. And I think Brandon will talk a little bit about his experience at Vivint and how he's achieved some of this or helped Vivint achieve some of this information advantage in the marketplace. The way that we see this manifesting in the survey results is really this move from big data being an experiment to really being a strategic investment. What we saw in the poll results is that 2/3 of the folks that we surveyed thought their big data investment was a strategic investment versus an experimental one. And this was a big change from the poll in 2015. So the results that we had in our most recent poll really showed a big decrease in folks that said big data is experimental for us. So people really are moving to operationalizing their big data investment. The other thing that we continue to see, and very, very consistent with the previous version of the maturity survey, is that BI is the #1 workload for big data. This has been a trend we're seeing across the board. Whether it's self-serve data visualization, whether it's production reporting and dashboarding, we really see BI adoption and BI against the big data platform as really the primary workload. This is where AtScale invests a lot. This is really the thing we help our customers with. But we also have, I'm curious, maybe I'll bring in Dan Kogan from Tableau. I'm curious to hear your experience so far in what Tableau customers and what Tableau users are saying about using Tableau in a big data environment.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. This is obviously data I'm happy to see, selfishly. Our view can be a little bit narrow where we get involved with big data projects. It's always around those BI use cases. And certainly over the last, I'd say 18 months, we've seen a significant ramp of production use cases on Hadoop as the primary database or one of the databases in the equation, or other NoSQL stores being used with Tableau. So the analysis here kind of points back to the trend I've seen through the lens of Tableau and Tableau's customers. I think what's driving it is, our, not to sound too markety, our vision is to help customers or help people see and understand their data. That includes all of their data, and as they're generating tons of new and really interesting information, I think Vivint will talk about IoT use cases, which are fueling that in a number of areas. They want to analyze that data. It makes perfect sense, and do that in conjunction with existing systems of record data and data that's lived in more traditional databases. And so we're seeing that coming together for really, truly kind of 360-degree views of the customer and of the product, and really all sorts of other things. So yeah, very, very much in line with what we're seeing in our customer base.
Yeah, That's great. Yeah, and it's really, I think, kind of an indication, again, of the maturity of these big data platforms. I think 2 or 3 years ago, there may have been concerns whether it was performance or governance or data quality. At least the experience that I've had in the past year or so, or past few years, is really those concerns have gone away, and people are viewing these big data platforms as ready for prime time. And I think that BI workload moving over is a really great indicator of that. So let's pause here. It's time for my favorite part of every webinar, which is doing polls. And I'm serious about that. I really think getting insight from the audience about where you are in your experiences, it's always interesting to see how your experience is aligning with what we're seeing in the marketplace. So let's do poll number 2.
Yeah, so Josh, for this poll, we're asking individuals, what business intelligence or analytics tools do you use? Josh, I think what we've seen is that typically individuals, everybody uses Excel, #1 BI tool in the world, right? But then many organizations may have one of the older, more traditional tools, such as Business Objects or Cognos or MicroStrategy in place, and then they have one of the newer, the visualization tools. Tableau, our partner here, being a perfect example of that. And so we're really interested in hearing what you in the audience, what you're using. And it looks like we've got a vast number of users kind of sprinkled across. We've got about 5 more seconds if you want to put your entry in there. Okay. And so we'll wrap up our poll now.
All right. And the winner is Tableau, or Click. But I'm going to say it's Tableau. And again, these results are really consistent with these results are really consistent with what we see in our deployments, which is I think Tableau has really taken the market by storm. And I'm not super intelligent for figuring that out. You can just look at what the installed base looks like and look at the success of the company. But this idea of giving business users the ability to do self-service visualization and analytics on their desktop or on the web, I think has really changed the game for business intelligence. And Tableau has started to really displace some of the more traditional BI platforms, whether it's MicroStrategy or Business Objects, these vertically integrated platforms that have very rigid metadata and very constrained visualization environments. And this is what we see in our customers. They're trying to migrate to using Tableau. They're often trying to kind of maintain a small investment in MicroStrategy and Business Objects, but they're trying to unlock the self-service capabilities that you get with Tableau. And of course, Excel is everywhere. At the end of the day, customers and users love to take data sets and download them into Excel and use pivot tables. And this is something we think about a lot at AtScale as customers are moving their BI workloads to Hadoop, is no matter how much any one of us would like it to be one front end, there are often multiple front ends. And one of the challenges is how do you provide and enable the self-service that you want while still having a shared metadata level that can be accessed by multiple BI tools across that big data platform. So I would say there is this, on the BI adoption side, there's this proliferation of front-end tools, a move to self-service. The other really big trend that we saw in the latest results of the maturity survey is a significant move to the cloud. Not that all data is going to be in the cloud, but what you can see here is that today, at least half of our survey respondents are using cloud for a portion of their big data deployment. Surprisingly, over 10% have all of their big data in the cloud, and a quarter have more than half of their big data in the cloud. And I think if you compare those numbers with what they looked like 5 years ago, it would be vastly different. But what's even more interesting is almost 3/4 of our respondents are planning on doing more big data in the cloud, and almost half of them are going to have the majority of their data in the cloud. And I think this is something that we're certainly paying attention to. Vijay, from Cloudera, if you think about the words cloud and era, I know that the original vision behind the creation of Cloudera was kind of in anticipation of data moving to the cloud. I'm curious with what you're seeing in the marketplace in terms of cloud adoption, cloud migration, and the trade-offs that customers are thinking about as they consider a cloud investment.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So absolutely. I would say cloud adoption has really picked up in the last couple of years, if you will. We're seeing a lot of action and a lot of use cases that customers are deploying purely in the cloud, especially when it comes to some of the IoT use cases. They definitely want to bring a lot of that sensor data into the cloud and do analytics on the cloud. I think our guess is that our cloud workloads are probably going to double in the next couple of years. So we are seeing, obviously tremendous focus and action in the cloud. In terms of considerations, I think one of the key things so it's not just that customers want to move to the cloud, that's definitely a given. The key consideration, one of the things that we're hearing from customers is also portability in the cloud, right? So how do they obviously don't want to get locked up with any one specific cloud vendor. So what they're asking is, how can I move my data between cloud vendors? How can I do analytics across different cloud vendors, right? So obviously that portability for cloud will be a key aspect, I think, to succeed in the cloud. Obviously they don't want to get locked into any one specific vendor. They want to make sure they are flexible enough. They have the flexibility to move data and actually analyze data workloads across different cloud platforms. So I think that's definitely a trend that we are starting to see with respect to cloud adoption.
Got it. Hey, thanks, Vijay. Yeah, and I really think, one of the other things is on the topic of portability is also, I heard this term from a customer I was talking to recently, and he said that their vision for where they had their big data platforms or where they put their big data processing was to take a native data approach. I hadn't heard that term before, but what he meant by that is they want to have their big data platforms deployed where the data lives natively.
Exactly.
So if it's IoT data that's coming off of sensors and that's collected in the cloud, they want their big data processing there. If it's ERP data that's from an on-premise deployment, they're going to have their big data processing there. And this will, what I think this really means is the future of big data really has to be anticipating the fact that data will be both on-premise and in the cloud, and how do you merge those two things together? Dan, I don't know if you have any additional commentary on, from the Tableau customer perspective, whether it's wanting Tableau existing in the cloud or Tableau to access data in the cloud, what you're seeing, and if it's consistent with our survey results.
Yeah, no, it's 100% consistent, Josh, with what you just said. The concept we see with our customer base, same thing. We use the term data gravity. But so customers are doing analytics with where that data lives. So like you said, if it's coming from an on-prem ERP system, they're deploying the BI tools and their analytics stack next to that, in the data center on-prem. If it's born in the cloud data, they're deploying their BI to the cloud. And what we see is most new applications, or many new applications, are just going to the cloud. And customers are not migrating, lifting, and shifting as much infrastructure, but they're spinning up new projects, new infrastructure. So that makes sense that a lot of the big data projects associated with new types of data being collected in new projects are happening natively in the cloud. And customers look for that hybrid bridge to be able to see all that data, the data that's on-prem, the data that's in cloud. And at Tableau, we're facilitating that with a choice of deployment options on-prem as a SaaS service in the cloud, or running in IaaS in Google Azure or AWS clouds. So we try to facilitate that, make that as seamless as possible for our customers.
Yeah, no, I think that the key is seamless there. How do you kind of bridge that gap, and at least from the consumer perspective, make sure they don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. So I guess I touched on this already, but for I know we have a bunch of data architects and IT executives and managers on the phone. What I think this means for you is, and what folks should be thinking about is, how do you manage this hybrid data portfolio? And it's really hybrid in two senses. One is it's hybrid in terms of the data platform. It's hybrid in terms of where is that data going to live? Is it going to be on cloud or on premises or in the cloud? And then even it's going to be hybrid in terms of the consumption model. How do you handle kind of the growth of tools like Tableau, the ever-presence of Excel, and the need to maintain existing investments that are maybe used for kind of enterprise report creation, like a MicroStrategy or Business Objects. I think that's really what that world is going to look like, is some combination of all of those things. And what this, one of the things that we're hearing from our customers, and this is in part because I think when customers talk to us, this is one of the reasons they reach out and talk to AtScale, is how do you handle governed self-service for BI in this environment? How do you allow those Tableau users to seamlessly access the data assets that they need, take advantage of the self-serve capabilities that Tableau provides, while at the same time delivering secure and consistent access and shared results and shared definitions across other data access mediums. So this question of how do I access the data, how do I make sure I'm respecting data platform security policies, how do I ensure governance so that when someone asks for, before I was at AtScale, I spent a lot of time, my previous job, I worked at Yahoo in the internal reporting and analytics group, running all of our big data platforms. And I can tell you we spend a fair amount of time explaining why the count of visits that were reported in Tableau were different than the ones that showed up in Click, and then were different than the ones in our MicroStrategy dashboard. So this idea of governance, how do you provide kind of a governed interface for standard metrics, standard dimensions, is going to be really relevant in this environment of hybrid data assets and big data platform adoption. So the one final thing that we saw, and I think everybody on this webinar has access to the attachments and links, so you can get the full, if you go to that attachments and links section, you can get the full download of the maturity results. But the final thing I'm going to highlight really is what is driving big data value? What is the anticipated driver of adoption? I'm glad that curiosity is on the low end. We see cost savings as really not the primary driver anymore. It's really, how do I develop new applications? How do I use this big data to generate revenue? And kind of, I would say, underlying all of this is this need for scale-out data. What we've seen in the marketplace is that the traditional data platforms and traditional BI platforms really don't work well in an environment where the anticipated data volume is growing exponentially, and you have to scale out to hundreds of terabytes or petabytes of data. And I think we're, one very relevant domain where scale out is super, super important is in the realm of IoT. And so Vijay on the line, who is responsible for the IoT solutions at Cloudera, I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of how you see scale out driving adoption in the world of IoT. And then I think it'll be enough of us vendors talking. We can, after Vijay talks about IoT and the primary use cases and drivers of adoption, we can toggle over to Brandon, and he can tell us some real world use cases of how he's using this data to drive it an information advantage.
Absolutely, Josh. So I think IoT is definitely one of the key drivers for this scale-out needs from our customers today. Obviously, given the fact that you're talking about billions and billions of connected endpoints, that is generating data every second, every millisecond, right? So you're talking about massive amounts of data volumes. that our customers are now dealing with from an IoT standpoint. And what they're now saying is that, IoT used to be all about the number of edge points or the connected points, but now people have stopped talking about the 30 billion connected points. Now people are really talking about what do I do with all of that data, right? And what our customers are now saying is that the success of their IoT deployments really depends on their ability to actually manage, process, and really drive insights from all of this data that IoT is generating, right? That's what the real value from IoT is going to be. So if you think about IoT as a, kind of the data characteristics of IoT, if you will, obviously, definitely we're talking about massive data volumes. So if you take a self-driving cars, for example, that'll generate anywhere close to 2 petabytes of data per car per year. 2 petabytes, right? Think about an offshore oil rig. That can generate somewhere like 1 to 2 terabytes of data every single day. Or turbines, which generate about 1 to 5 terabytes of data every single day, right? So obviously we're talking about massive volumes of data, but that's just part of the storyline, right? There's definitely volumes, but you're talking also about huge variety of the data sources. So we are talking about customers where they're bringing in intermittent readings of temperature or pressure or RPM on one side of the spectrum. But on the other side, we also have customers who are bringing in noise levels, acoustic data from turbines and from generators to understand their wear and tear. We have customers who are bringing in live video streams to do things such as video analytics, right? So you're talking about a wide variety of data sources, diverse structures, schemas, and formats of data that you now have to deal with, right? So if you think about it, it's actually a big data problem now. IoT is definitely a big data problem. You're talking about huge volumes. There's huge variety in data, different structures and schemas. Not only that, you have to deal with data that's coming at you in real time, in streams, or you also have in some use cases where data is coming in terms of batches, right? So from a data management perspective, you need a platform that can accommodate both data in motion as well as data at rest, right? So that's how this kind of becomes a classic big data problem, and we are seeing a lot of traction from our customers to deploy some of these IoT use cases that we are starting to see today. I would say, apart from all, we're talking about the volume variety and the velocity, but I think what is most important is really talking about, context of the sensor data, right? Because sensor data, if you think about it, sensor data by itself is meaningless, right? The real value from IoT is going to come from when you can combine and correlate that sensor data with other internal and external data sources. So, for example, just saying, hey, your brake pads are thinning out for a connected car. I mean that's good. That's good to know. But where auto manufacturers want to go and where they're going is, instead of just saying your brake pads are thinning out, what they want to be able to say is, hey, customer, we know your brake pads are thinning out, and by the way, here is a 15% off coupon for brake pad replacement at a shop close to where you live, right? Now that certainly becomes compelling because now you have to bring in sensor data, you have to combine that with the customer data, with location data, with and provide a compelling offer back to the customer, right? And that's where a lot of value from IoT is really going to be generated. Now, in order to do that, obviously you're talking about bringing in data from sensors, as you see in this slide. I mean, you obviously have sensors that is generating data every single second. You may or may not have a gateway depending on the IoT use case. And then, you can deploy the big data platform or Hadoop on the cloud or in the data center. And you can actually stream data from sensors in real time into Cloudera. You can use tools such as Kafka and Flume to do the ingestion. But it's not just about, bringing in sensor data. As I said, if you see down below, you can combine that with data from other internal systems, so customer data, manufacturing data, other internal data sources. Or even we have customers who are combining that with external data sources. So let's say you want to combine that with weather data or traffic data in real time, right? That's where the real value of IoT is going to be coming from. And I think one of the most important aspects is that obviously we provide a platform that helps customers, ingest data, process data. But I think what is most important is the box that you see on top, which are diverse analytical options that our customers have, right? So, for example, a lot of you guys already have Tableau. You're using Tableau for BI. You can continue to use the same BI tools, but still have access to all of this data, including IoT data, and combine that with other data sources, right? You can do SQL analytics on all of this data using Impala. Or what a lot of our customers are doing now, especially from an IoT perspective, is they're using the machine learning libraries in Spark to build machine learning models, right? They're building models, they're refining these models, and they're continuously testing and refining these models based on based on some of the use cases. And last but not the least, you can also connect this to real-time applications. So let's say you have an alerting engine or a recommendation engine. You can connect those to real-time applications and have make those use cases even more compelling from an IoT perspective, right? So just a high-level overview of how customers are deploying Hadoop or Cloudera to manage and drive some of the IoT use cases. I'm sure Brandon can probably provide some more insights into how they are driving some of the IoT use cases and also about their big data journey at Vivint from an IoT perspective. Josh, back to you.
All right. No, thanks, Vijay. Yeah, I think that kind of the key takeaway there is it's not just about collecting the data. It is about what you do with it. I think we've got, is this our last poll, Irina?
It is.
I'm so sad to hear that. Let's get it over with.
Okay, so we just had Vijay talking a little bit about the IoT and sharing some information about Cloudera, and we'd like to ask from you, because obviously there are a lot of different big data platforms out there. They seem to new ones coming out, and also with the move into the cloud, more and more people are having more of a hybrid approach. So we're interested in knowing, for those of you in our audience, what is it that you're using today? Looks like we've got some Cloudera users out there. We even have some Hortonworks users. Looks like some of those who are early on in your journey are weighing in and voting in. Don't have it yet, so not quite sure. But looks like we're getting a pretty even split. We've got about 20 more seconds of this voting. So for the rest of you on the line, definitely encourage you for us to get the best view of our audience and really understand kind of as a proxy for what the broader market is using out there as well. So Josh, we're going to be wrapping this up here. It looks like we've got, we did in fact have some cloud users weigh in.
Very good. Good stuff. Okay. Thank you, Irina. And yeah, it looks like we have a mix here of kind of on-prem as well as folks who are in the cloud, as we talked about before. Let's switch over now and get a real maturity story. I'm Brandon. I don't know if I'm giving you too much credit by referencing your maturity, but let's maybe you can tell us a little bit about Vivint and a little bit about, it looks like there at Vivint you do just about everything, Senior Director of Everything, which is, congratulations, a great title. Maybe tell us, kind of give us an overview, and I'd love to hear a little bit more detail about your experience as you've gone into big data.
Great. Well, so many different things there. But first off, to everyone who's joined, thank you. Don't give up. I know I've heard a few of you are playing a drinking game that every time someone says big data, you get to take a shot. I will keep the trend going. Make sure that the rest of this webinar is very exciting for you. But let's just talk a little bit about the space so you have some context. So the security industry has been around for over 100 years, right? And really, in that 100 years, not much has changed. And to be honest with you, it hasn't been a great customer experience for those 100 years. Often it's felt like disarming a bomb. And, if you've had a security system, you know what I mean. You probably had friends come over to the house and they didn't know the system was armed, and maybe someone wakes up and opens a door and your alarm's screaming, your kids are waking up, the police show up, and things aren't really going well. So at Vivint, we really wanted to change the experience. We don't believe customers were broken. We believe the experience was broken, and we wanted to change it. And to change it, it all started at the data. We needed to use some of the same sensors that are out there, use some of the same panels and things, but yet make it a better experience. And so Vivint brought me on to use the data to revolutionize the experience. Here we have a slide of some of our things, right? We have what you'd expect for most security systems. We have cameras, we have thermostats, we have light bulbs and locks. And anyway, long story short, all this data comes in, and we currently have about 25,000 events per second coming in for the IoT data. And so we then take all of that data, we push it into Kafka, and then we store it into HDFS to then do different things with it. So that's a little bit about Vivint and what we do.
Thank you, Brandon. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, when we were prepping for this webinar, you made a comment that I like, which is, does everybody have big data? And I think a lot of what people are trying to do, it's not that what they're trying to accomplish has changed. They're asking similar questions, but the nature of the data has changed. What's your view on, what makes data big? And now I can tell you I've had a few shots in this last sentence. But what makes big data big? How would you classify it?
And that's a great thing, right? I think having been to a lot of these, a lot of people debate what is or isn't big data, and is it really a fad? And being a person who, when I was a kid, I bought the Reebok pump shoes because I believed it'd make me a better basketball player. You can see that I do jump into fads to try and learn them, and maybe the Reebok shoes didn't help me, but I would say big data definitely has. So how do we define what is big data, kind of for this discussion? And just so everyone who knows, because there are some people who aren't in it yet, if you're able to do your analysis, your transformations, run your models, do everything on a single computer or a single server, I'm not sure it makes sense to stand up a big data system, because realistically, there's overhead, there's costs, there's times, there's skill set. I probably wouldn't do it. When you get to a point where you can't do it on a single server, I think that's where it makes sense to get into it, right? And that's where we were, right? When we started out, we were having to drop data after 14 days because there was just so much of it. We couldn't store it and we couldn't process it. So we were kind of forced to look into big data, and it turned out to be the right thing for us.
You had no choice.
Yep.
Maybe since it sounds like you definitely have some battle scars from your experience, a lot of times we hear stories about customers that because they can collect the data, they do. They say, hey, this Hadoop data lake thing sounds really good, and I have a lot of data, so I'm just going to start dropping all of my data onto a Hadoop cluster, and I'm going to check the box and say I've done the big data thing. My sense from talking to you and your experience is that you took kind of a more thoughtful approach to your big data journey, and maybe you can share with the audience a little bit about how you kind of set yourself up for success in driving value from your big data investment, and maybe some pitfalls you wish you had avoided, or you would suggest other people try to avoid.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that Vivint did early on, they said, hey, we know we need to do some of this big data stuff, but they weren't willing to invest a huge amount of resources into it. And so I was set up from my boss and from the team here that I had to bootstrap big data. And I actually think it probably was one of the best things that happened to us here. The reason is when you're bootstrapping, you have to prove out some amount of value before you can get more resources, right? You have to get some wins before you can continue to build it. And big data is one of those things, especially if you have a lot of data, it's easy to throw a lot of money at it. I think probably the biggest error that people have committed in setting up huge big data clusters is they take too many requirements and they try and solve too many problems, and they get too many stakeholders involved, and inevitably trying to serve too many masters, they end up serving none of them. And so I think having a really laser focus on value and understanding what that value is how we were able to grow from just me up to a team of 14 and a large cluster running. In terms of the pitfalls, I think like anything, there's go ahead.
Nope, that was
okay. I thought you were going to ask a question. Sorry.
Noise.
Apologies. So, yeah, in terms of the pitfalls, I think there's a couple of them. I think the first one is there's a lot of vendors out there claiming to be end-to-end Hadoop solutions and making it totally easy, and that there's no extra work, and that just a business person could do everything. And I think that utopia that we're trying to achieve, I think we'll get there someday. But for me, I wouldn't have survived without a skilled data/software engineer, a person who was able to help out even with some of the tools that we invested in. And now I didn't have to grow a team of 10 data engineers because of the tools out there, or 10 software engineers, but having a technical resource or a technical person to be able to dive in and troubleshoot, I think was absolutely critical to us being able to make it work here at Vivint.
Got it. No, I think you're right. What we see in the marketplace is an end-to-end solution. There isn't one out there, and it makes sense to understand what are the components or the things you're trying to achieve, and pick the right components to do the job. I think it always comes back to picking the right tool for the job. I'd love, if you're willing, I'd love to have you walk us through maybe some of the insights that you've been able, taking the approach that you've had, which is focusing on value. I know you've got some examples that you can share with the audience of kind of real insights that have come from your big data investment. It would be great to see those.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of bootstrapping, right, we wanted to start focusing on places that we believed there was a lot of value. And so the two places that we started focusing on were on operations, and then also on the call center. So the way that Vivint works is we install product in your home, and then we help maintain that product over the life of the customer, and to have customers that might call in, a year later and might need something, well, we have to roll the truck out, and we're happy to roll the truck out and make things work. But if we're rolling a truck out for something that doesn't matter, we're wasting up to maybe, say, $150. And so for us, looking at truck rolls and what was causing truck rolls, we were surprised to see that we were rolling a lot of trucks for batteries. Now, Vivint installs millions of batteries each year, and many of the batteries that we were rolling trucks for had only been installed maybe a week or 2 weeks. And it turns out that a very small percentage of the batteries that came from our supply chain were dead on arrival. But the installer, when they installed your Vivint Smart Home system, they didn't realize it. They didn't have tools to know that. They left, and then a week later, sorry, you got a low battery, and we had to send someone else out. So we basically found that was a problem. We worked with the embedded engineers who work with our panel and our sensors, and we had them update the code to check the battery level at time of install, and now what was costing us $150 to fix costs us 10 cents to fix, because we basically throw a new battery in. So that was our first big win, and it created enough momentum to keep growing the team. But ultimately for us, big data and analytics isn't just about saving some revenue here or making a little bit of revenue somewhere else. Really, for us, big data is the product. Analytics is our product. It's ultimately what we're in the business of doing. And I know this is the case with a lot of your other customers. I was talking with one of my friends who works at General Electric, and they're saying they now make more money on the data that comes off the engines than they do when they sell the engines. And so as our world transformed to data as the product, and as my team here at Vivint matured, we wanted to move in that direction. So the first product that we launched was a smart home assistant that basically controls your thermostat. And really there's a dilemma here where you could save customers a lot of money if you made them uncomfortable, or you could make them comfortable and waste a lot of money and energy. And so we rolled out an artificial intelligence based on Hadoop and based on our big data that enables us to understand when customers leave their home and automatically set their thermostat back and save them money. We just completed a study on this, actually. We had 10,000 homes that were in this study. We collected data for this particular study every 5 minutes, and then basically wanted to run models to see how much would we have used if we weren't using this. And this is the results of our study. On average, we save 10% in terms of dollar savings, or in terms of energy savings, and then it's up to, depending on where you live, it's $50, $60 just over the past 6 months. So I think big data, not only can it help change your business, but it can help change the world that we live in, and helping us to use less resources and helping us to make better decisions and be more aware of what's going on.
Yeah, this is great, and thank you, Brandon, for sharing this. Really, it's always great to see kind of the application of the capabilities that that as a vendor like AtScale or Tableau or Cloudera, it's great to see the real use cases and the value that comes out of those. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. So. Right on time. I think we're going to basically wrap up the prepared content from the webinar. We've got time for some Q&A, but hopefully the folks that participated today and listened in, you came away with a few things. Big data is still important. Big data is big. It's not going anywhere. In fact, adoption is really taking off. I think cloud adoption is significant, and it's something to really pay attention to. I know from our survey results, we saw some people already deployed in the cloud. It's unavoidable. And so thinking about how you're going to get prepared for data in the cloud, I think is something that everybody should be thinking about. In that environment, governance is super important. Governance for secure self-service is really important, and we do think that BI, BI is this all-encompassing word that it ranges from traditional reporting to data visualization to analytics, but it is the number one workload that we see that's kind of overlaid on top of these other trends. So thanks everybody for joining in. Thanks Irina, thanks Dan, thanks BJ, and especially thank you Brandon for sharing your insights with us. Hopefully it's been informative for me, and hopefully for folks on the phone it has been as well.
Absolutely. So now we're going to go ahead to some Q&A. It looks like several of you have submitted some questions, those of you who have joined us. And many of these, it looks like they are for Brandon. So Brandon, you are in demand. Let me see. The first one says, I'm assuming this is for you. Is self-service really working for you? So we'll let you take that.
That's a great question. So, right, we have IoT data, which for any one customer, right, what that means is instead of one row in a traditional world where you'd have, your customer and you'd have all the attributes kind of on that same row in your database, I have millions of rows of data, and it's sparse data, right? So a particular sensor might open once in every blue moon, and as many of you have with your data, there's nuances to the data. So went through the process of trying to train some business analysts and SQL experts on trying to deal with the IoT time series data, and we found it really challenging. We found that some of the windowing functions that you have to do on IoT data to make sense of it was simply not something that they were built for. Could some of them learn it? Sure, but was I going to be able to take that company wide? Absolutely not. And so what we did is there's a lot of the data that's valuable, but it's not necessarily valuable to everyone. It's at its atomic level, at its smallest unit, because they really shouldn't care when a door opened in my home or when a window closed in my home or when I changed my thermostat. Really, the questions that the business should be asking should be, hey, is this user having problems? How's their engagement? Can I help them out with things like that? And so they don't, both from a sensitivity, it doesn't make sense to share the data, but also from a skill set, it didn't make sense to allow self-service at the raw data. So for us, that's why we partner with AtScale. And AtScale has been great for us. We're basically building an aggregate data layer that are things that one, aren't as sensitive, but two, that can be understood by people who understand traditional data that's not necessarily time series. So we can aggregate things on frequency. We can know, hey, these are people that are using their system. These are people that are having issues. And then we can get that into the other pieces of the business that work. And so I would say self-service is starting to work for us, and it hadn't in the past.
Excellent. That's really helpful. Thanks for going into so much detail. So a couple other questions here, Brandon, for you. Is what's your take specifically? I know we've had Vijay offer and Josh and Dan offer their input on the cloud versus on-prem, and it looks like some of our users would like to know, what is your take, Brandon, on cloud versus the on-prem?
I think that's a great question. I agree that the cloud is innovating at a tremendous speed, but I guess there's a couple other things I'd add that I don't know if I heard the other people say. So the first one is cost. Our decision really to go on-prem for our stuff was a cost-based decision. When you have really large workloads and a tremendous amount of data, you put it in the cloud, you have less control over some of the costs that are going on. I've talked with some of my friends who also have large data sets, but that are in the cloud, and they do something interesting because it's almost free to put data into clouds. It becomes expensive if you want to extract, or it becomes expensive if you want to use compute. And so some of my friends are actually pushing to multiple clouds, and then they're arbitraging on compute. So basically you say, hey, compute's cheaper over here, we'll run our jobs over here, compute's cheaper over there. So I think there's some interesting things there. I'm a huge fan of hybrid clouds. I think when you have jobs that need to, or you have spikes in traffic, if you have that nature of a business, being able to flash into the cloud and use cloud to augment your infrastructure, I think is a much more cost-effective way to structure your business. I guess the only other thing that I would say that I kind of see possibly is coming on, it's interesting from a service side what the different cloud makers are doing. So if I was starting and I'm a small company and a startup, I would start in the cloud because I wouldn't have people to help manage servers, or I wouldn't have some of those other skill sets that were needed. So it's cheap and easy to start. But I think what you'll see, what cloud vendors are trying to do, is they're trying to develop services that will give lock-in. And so whether it's artificial intelligence or it's data science add-ons that are unique to them, I think you'll see the clouds doing everything they can to give you unique services that then you can't live without, because for you to develop it yourself, it's just too expensive.
Wow, awesome. I think that probably gave an even broader answer than many people were expecting, so that's really helpful. Let's see. It looks like There's a question, another one here for you. What are some of the BI tools that you actually use?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about at-scale. The at-scale hits that kind of data layer for us that we're able to share. We've used Tableau for quite a few years. The interesting thing, right, with IoT data and some of the data sets that we're working with, it's incredibly expensive to scale up your Tableau server to be able to do it. And so one of the reasons that we chose to go with at scale is it actually helped us to be able to do more in Tableau. It helped our speeds. It helped our ability to manipulate data. And so that was an important thing there. I'd say the other thing that you should think of when you're looking at big data, and I don't know if I necessarily classify this as BI, but I think it's an important thing is kind of ingestion, transformation, right? If you're looking at historical, they call it ETL. I know the popular thing is to call it ELT to say, hey, I'm going to transform at runtime or when I need to. But for us, kind of our key partner there was Datamere. They helped us very early on get data into the cloud and be able to do some of that IoT level manipulation.
Fantastic. So Brandon, thank you so much. You know, I want to tell on you a little bit. When Brandon and I first met and we were going to be talking about this webcast, one of the challenges that he's had in doing webcasts, for those of you in the audience and who may have done it too, is there's no feedback from the audience, right? It's just this silent void. And one of the things that we were saying might be helpful is, wouldn't it be nice if you could actually clap and have an applause come from the rest of the audience? So I just want to personally thank Josh, Vijay, Dan, and Brandon for their contribution today and their time and everything else.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we got a little applause despite the fact that we are in fact online. And so again, I just want to go ahead and wrap. It looks like we don't have any more questions here. And so if anybody on the line is interested in getting more information, it looks like one of these links is wrong, but you will be able to download the survey report here in the attachments in BrightTalk. So we encourage you to do that, or visit us online at any of the links that you see here. So with that, I want to thank everyone who has attended, and once again, our presenters. Brandon, for all of your time and your insights, I'm sure it really helped the audience gain a real-world view. So thank you. Vijay and Dan, Josh, thank you. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.